Hi, everyone. Recently, my parents received what I'd call karma for a betrayal I never saw coming. And I won't lie, I felt zero remorse about it. I even found myself gloating a bit. But now some friends are telling me I went too far. I'll let you decide. I'm Mason, 17, and I'm about to start college soon. I applied to several business schools out of state, hoping to put some distance between me and my parents. They've always been more invested in my younger brother Liam than in me. He's been struggling in school, barely passing his classes. But it's not because he's incapable. It's because he's too focused on keeping up with his so-called cool friends, rather than actually studying. Despite his lack of effort, my parents make excuses for him, insisting his failures must be because of some learning disability they're convinced he has. They even took him to multiple specialists to get him evaluated after his school counsellor warned them he might not graduate on time without drastic improvement. But Liam's academic issues? Honestly, not my problem. I had my own plans, including applying to Stanford. A long shot, I know, but my grades weren't bad, and my friends believed I had a fair shot. I figured I might as well give it a go. To me, it was just one of many applications, but it became everything when I found out what my parents had done. Weeks passed, and I started hearing back from the schools I'd applied to. Acceptances rolled in, but I noticed I hadn't heard anything from Stanford, not even a rejection email. It felt strange since all my friends who applied had already heard back. When I checked Stanford's admissions portal, I found nothing. No status update, no confirmation. I even scored my inbox, thinking I might have missed an email. Still nothing. Left with no other option, I decided to call the admissions office. After a day of anxious waiting, they returned my call, confirming I had withdrawn my application. The news hit me like a truck. I hadn't withdrawn anything. I insisted they must have been mistaken, but they assured me an email requesting my withdrawal had been sent from my account just days after I submitted it. That entire day I felt numb, like the ground had fallen out from under me. I knew this wasn't some random glitch. Someone had gone behind my back. My first thought was Liam. I wouldn't put it past him to sabotage me out of jealousy. But after some thought, I realized it didn't make sense. If he'd pulled a stunt like this, he'd be too smug not to rub it in. Frustrated and desperate, I went to confront him anyway, asking if he'd messed with my application. But he just looked at me, utterly baffled, and before long, we were yelling. When our parents burst into the room to break up the fight, I was too angry to hold back. I demanded they tell me if they knew anything about my Stanford application. My dad looked stunned, and then, without warning, my mum started tearing up. It was her next words that stopped me cold. She admitted they were the ones who withdrew my application. Everything around me fell silent as her confession sank in. I didn't know what to say, and for a moment neither did they. After a long pause, my mum began explaining. She said that because I used to use my dad's laptop for everything before I got my own, they'd kept access to my email. So when they saw that I'd applied to Stanford, they panicked. Apparently, Liam's counsellor had suggested that he speak with me about academics or even have me tutor him. She had no idea we didn't get along and was just trying to help. But my parents took her words to mean that my academic success was weighing on Liam, damaging his self-esteem. My dad had been the one to suggest withdrawing my application, thinking that if I didn't go to a school as prestigious as Stanford, Liam wouldn't feel so inadequate. My mum, feeling torn, eventually agreed. She reasoned that if I didn't apply to Stanford, Liam wouldn't have to live with the pressure of being compared to his high-achieving older brother. They didn't think about how it might affect me or even ask me about it. They simply decided that Liam's insecurities were more important than my dreams. Together, they had withdrawn my application and deleted all traces of it from my inbox, covering their tracks so I wouldn't find out until it was too late. When my mum finished her story, she and my dad tried to comfort me, both of them apologizing and saying they hadn't thought about the consequences. My mum even added that they still believed I would have been fine with not going to Stanford since I had other options. I didn't respond. I was hurt beyond words. Without saying anything, I turned away from them and went to my room to pack. I knew I couldn't stay under the same roof with them for another minute. Ignoring their attempts to talk to me, I grabbed my things, called a cab, and headed to my grandparents' house. My dad's parents lived close, so I went to them. I could barely get through telling them the story without choking up. But when I finished, my grandpa stormed out of the room to call my parents. I could hear him tearing into them from the other room, his voice booming with anger. My grandma stayed by my side, comforting me as I finally let myself cry. Later, my grandpa returned to the room and told me not to worry. He'd already spoken to a lawyer about covering my college expenses, and he promised me I'd be taken care of. He reassured me that my other grandparents would come over the next day and that together they would figure out a way to help me rebuild after my parents' betrayal. By the next morning, my maternal grandparents had arrived, and they also insisted on paying for my tuition. That alone was a huge relief, but it didn't end there. They told me that they were so disappointed in my parents that they had decided to cut them out of their wills, leaving everything to me instead. The decision floored me. I didn't know how to thank them, but they told me it was the least they could do after everything I'd been through. It's been a few days since I moved in with my grandparents. My parents haven't reached out directly to apologize, but have texted, accusing me of being a snitch and selfish for telling my grandparents about what they did. I'd expected some kind of apology, but instead they seemed more concerned with the consequences of losing their inheritance than the pain they'd caused me. It's been a few days since I left home and settled at my grandparents' place. My parents still haven't directly apologized, and the few messages I did receive were nothing but insults, calling me selfish and saying I'd ruined the family by running to my grandparents. They're furious about the inheritance, but not one word about the betrayal itself. Living with my grandparents has been a strange mix of comfort and disbelief. I feel safe here, but it's still surreal how quickly everything changed. For the first time, I can sit down at a meal without the constant tension I'd grown so used to at home. I actually feel valued here. My grandparents are incredible. They didn't have to take me in or stand up for me, but they did without hesitation. But just as I was settling in, my parents showed up at my grandparents' house. I didn't know what they were thinking, showing up like that after everything they'd done. They stood on the doorstep, visibly irritated, my mum crossing her arms like she was just waiting to unleash her frustrations. I could feel my face getting hot. I wasn't ready for another confrontation, but it seemed like they had made up their minds to talk. My grandparents answered the door, blocking them from coming inside. My mum immediately started in, her voice loud enough that I'm pretty sure the neighbours could hear. She accused me of being dramatic and ungrateful, claiming that my Stanford application withdrawal wasn't such a big deal and that I should have been satisfied with the other schools I'd gotten into. "You're not even guaranteed a spot there," she said, brushing it off as if she hadn't stripped me of that chance entirely. I couldn't hold back any longer. I stepped forward and told her exactly what was on my mind, that they didn't have the right to make decisions for me, especially ones that would affect my entire future. My dad, who had been quiet up until that point, tried to jump in, insisting that they were just looking out for the family as a whole. "Your brother needed us," he said, as if that justified everything. I was beyond livid. They honestly thought they could frame this as some noble act of sacrifice for the sake of family unity. My grandfather, standing protectively by my side, cut in, his tone ice cold. He told them that they had betrayed my trust and put one child's needs above the others in a way that was simply unacceptable. My mum tried to argue back, but my grandfather wasn't having any of it. "You both prioritized appearances over your son's ambitions," he told them. "If you're going to continue to choose favoritism over fairness, then you have no place in our lives anymore. ... My parents looked stunned, as if they hadn't expected this level of confrontation. My dad tried to appeal to my grandparents directly, saying that it was unfair of them to change their wills over one little mistake. He went on to explain how my success would have negatively affected my brother's mental health, and he seemed convinced that they had done the right thing by withdrawing my Stanford application. At that moment, my grandmother reached over and gently but firmly closed the door. My parents were left standing outside, shouting through the door about how unfairly they were being treated. But my grandparents ignored them and led me back to the living room, where we could no longer hear their voices. After they left, I felt this strange combination of relief and sadness. As much as I despised what my parents had done, They were still my family. The betrayal hit deep, and I still wasn't sure if I'd ever be able to fully come to terms with it. But hearing my grandparents' support and seeing how they defended me so fiercely, it was exactly what I needed. Over the next few days, my grandparents reached out to a lawyer, and we went over some financial matters to ensure my college expenses would be covered. They reminded me that I wouldn't have to take out any loans or juggle work on top of my studies. They wanted me to focus on the next chapter without the financial stress hanging over me. All the practical preparations did help me shift focus from the pain to the future. But just as I thought things were calming down, I got another barrage of texts from my parents. This time they accused me of ruining the family's reputation and said I'd embarrass them by dragging my grandparents into our private matters. My mum went on to tell me how heartbroken they were, insisting that they'd only acted out of love and care for my brother's mental health. She even went so far as to claim that I didn't really deserve a spot at Stanford and was overreacting by taking this to my grandparents. The messages left me fuming. After everything, they still refused to own up to what they did. To them, my future and my dreams were secondary to maintaining Liam's fragile self-esteem. In their eyes, I wasn't the victim. I was the problem. They had already hurt me once. I wasn't about to let them do it again. At that point, I decided to cut them off entirely. I blocked their numbers, deleted their messages, and told my grandparents that I was done with them. It wasn't an easy decision, but it felt like the only way forward. The relief was instant, like a weight I'd been carrying finally lifted. As I prepare for college, I'm learning to accept that some people, even family, don't always have your best interests at heart. I still have moments of anger and sadness, but knowing my grandparents are behind me helps keep me grounded. The life I want is finally within reach, and I refuse to let their betrayal hold me back any longer. Settling into my grandparents' home felt surreal but comforting. I'd always loved visiting them, but living with them full-time was a new experience. They made me feel like I truly belonged, no conditions, no expectations. I could breathe freely here, and every day I felt more like myself. For the first time, I was starting to imagine a future where I wasn't constantly weighed down by my family's judgments and demands. In the weeks leading up to college, my grandparents were a steady source of support. They encouraged me to think about what I wanted, not just academically, but in life. They made a point of reminding me that I had the right to set boundaries and make choices for my own happiness. It was something I hadn't been used to, and at first it was hard to fully embrace it. But slowly, with their encouragement, I started to feel like I could. I decided to let a few close friends in on everything that had happened. I didn't want to go into too many details, but they deserved to know why I hadn't been around much. Most of them were supportive, but a couple of them were uneasy about how I had stood up to my parents, telling me that I might regret cutting ties so completely. While their reactions stung a bit, I had learned from my grandparents that I didn't need to justify myself to anyone who wasn't willing to truly understand. Still, the situation with my parents remained complicated. While they couldn't call or text me anymore, they found other ways to stir up trouble. My mum reached out to a few of my old teachers, spreading her side of the story and painting me as an ungrateful kid who had been led astray by my grandparents. The teachers knew better, of course, but hearing that my mum had gone that far to control the narrative was frustrating. It was like she couldn't accept that I had the right to make decisions independently from her. My grandparents, on the other hand, were determined to give me every opportunity to move forward without the shadow of my parents looming over me. When they officially revised their wills and named me as their sole heir, they sat me down to talk it through. They explained that while they didn't want this situation to escalate to the level it had, they felt that my parents' actions were too serious to be ignored. They wanted to make sure I knew that I was loved and that I wouldn't have to rely on anyone who couldn't see my worth. They made it clear that they weren't just doing this as punishment for my parents. They were doing it as a way of investing in me. They told me they believed in my potential and knew I'd use this chance wisely. Hearing those words brought a lump to my throat. I didn't say much, just a quiet thank you. But I think they understood how much it meant to me. Despite the relief I felt, Part of me still wrestled with the bitterness of it all. I wanted to feel nothing toward my parents, to move on and be completely unaffected by what they'd done. But some days were harder than others. On those days, I took to writing. I started jotting down everything I was feeling: anger, hurt, disbelief. It helped me let go of some of the resentment that had built up, even if just for a little while. As the start of college approached, I focused on packing and preparing for my move. My grandparents helped with everything, from picking out supplies to making sure I had all the paperwork in order. Their excitement was contagious. It was like we were all heading off on this journey together. My grandmother even knitted me a blanket in the school's colours, telling me that I could pull it out on tough days as a reminder that I had a family who believed in me. The day before I left, we had a quiet dinner together. My grandparents gave me a heartfelt pep talk, telling me that they were proud of everything I'd accomplished. My grandpa, who rarely showed much emotion, patted me on the back and told me he knew I'd make them proud. His voice wavered a little as he said it, and I could see just how much he meant it. That moment gave me a renewed sense of purpose. For once, I wasn't doing this for anyone else. I was doing it for myself and for the people who truly cared about me. Finally, move-in day arrived. We loaded up the car and headed to campus, and as we pulled up to the dorms, a wave of nervous excitement washed over me. This was the fresh start I had been waiting for, a chance to define my own life without the weight of family dynamics constantly hanging over me. My grandparents helped me settle in, staying long enough to make sure I was comfortable but giving me space to get acquainted with my new home. As they were leaving, my grandmother hugged me tightly and whispered, "Remember, you're never alone. We're always here for you." With one last wave, they headed back to the car, leaving me standing there, feeling a mixture of excitement, pride, and gratitude. I watched until their car disappeared down the road, feeling the impact of their words settle deep within me. I was finally free to shape my life as I saw fit, and I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, I had people who would stand by me. As I stood there, surrounded by the buzz of campus life, I took a deep breath and let go of any lingering resentment. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anything hold me back. The first few weeks of college flew by in a blur of classes, orientation events, and late nights getting to know my roommates. Being surrounded by people my age who were also figuring out life away from home was both exciting and surreal. Every day, I felt more and more like I was finding my footing, learning who I was when there were no expectations or family tensions weighing me down. My grandparents checked in often, not to hover but to remind me that they were there, cheering me on from a distance. Every call and message from them felt like a reminder of the foundation I had now, a place of stability and support I could return to whenever I needed it. Still, there were moments when the past crept back in. Occasionally, I'd hear from mutual family friends who hadn't heard about the falling out with my parents, or even from acquaintances who innocently asked, "So how's your family handling you being away?" I tried to brush those questions off with simple answers, not wanting to rehash what happened. I had to remind myself that I was here to build my future, not dwell on the past. And thankfully, with every new friendship I made and every milestone I reached, those moments became easier to handle. One afternoon, as I was walking back to my dorm, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was my mum. The sight of her name on my screen brought back a mix of emotions, mostly anger mixed with a tinge of sadness. She'd written, "Hey, I've been thinking about everything. Can we talk?" I stopped in my tracks, debating whether I should respond or just ignore it. Part of me was curious. Did she regret anything? Was this an attempt to make amends? But another part of me, the part that remembered the hurt and betrayal, didn't want to let her words get under my skin. After a few minutes of pacing, I decided to text my grandparents instead. They'd been my sounding board ever since I left home, and they always offered perspective without pushing me one way or the other. I wrote, "My mum messaged me. She wants to talk. Not sure if I should respond." Within minutes, my grandmother replied, "Sweetheart, listen to your heart. If you think you're ready to hear her out, do it. But if you're not, there's no rush. You've come so far already." Taking a deep breath, I decided to leave the message on read and move on with my day. I wasn't ready to talk to her, not after everything. I could feel her regret wasn't enough, not yet. I needed time to heal before I'd even consider opening that door again. Ignoring her text wasn't easy, but I knew that if she truly wanted to make things right, she'd respect my need for space and time. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself thriving in ways I hadn't expected. I joined a few clubs, became friends with my classmates, and even took on a part-time job at the campus library. Every step I took felt like reclaiming a part of my life that had always been out of reach. The satisfaction of building a life on my terms was exhilarating. I was no longer defined by family dynamics or weighed down by the impossible expectations of people who couldn't see me for who I was. I was just me. One evening, after a long day of classes, I found myself at a campus cafe studying with a group of friends. We laughed over coffee and swapped stories about our lives back home. Somehow, the conversation drifted toward family, and I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should share my story. But these friends had become like family here. They'd been nothing but supportive and kind. So I decided to be honest. I told them about the difficult decision to cut ties, the betrayal, and how my grandparents had stepped in. As I spoke, I realized I wasn't just recounting the pain. I was celebrating how far I'd come. My friends listened quietly, nodding and offering words of support. One of them, Emily, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "It takes courage to know when to walk away. You did what you had to, and look at you now. You're here, making a life that's all yours." Her words struck a chord. She was right. I'd made it through the hardest part, and now I was doing more than just surviving. I was thriving. My grandparents came to visit me for a weekend a few months later. We toured the campus, attended a few local events, and even tried the famous burger joint everyone raved about. Having them see me in my new environment meant the world to me. They were beaming with pride, and I could tell they felt they'd made the right decision standing by me. During one of our conversations, my grandpa mentioned, "You know, it doesn't matter where you came from. What matters is where you're going. And you, my boy, are going places." His words stayed with me long after they left. I kept them in my mind, using them as fuel every time I felt doubt creeping in. That night, as I sat by my dorm window overlooking the campus, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known before. College had become more than just a new start. It was a turning point, a chance to leave behind the hurt and truly find myself. I knew there would always be moments when the past would resurface, moments of wondering if things could ever be mended with my parents. But I also knew that I had a family who loved me, believed in me, and gave me the freedom to choose my path. In that moment, under the quiet night sky, I realized I was exactly where I was meant to be, and I knew I could handle whatever came next. Months slipped by, and life kept moving. Each day at college brought something new, a challenge, a friend, a lesson. Slowly, the hurt and resentment I'd carried for so long started to feel more like distant echoes than sharp stabs. I'd thought that anger was the only thing keeping me strong, but in reality, it was letting go that allowed me to stand taller. One evening in early spring, I received an unexpected email from my dad. It was short, just a few lines saying he'd like to talk whenever I was ready. A part of me clenched at the thought, but after everything I'd been through, I felt more prepared. With a deep breath, I replied, agreeing to meet him in town when I was home for summer break. As summer rolled around, I returned to my grandparents' house, feeling the quiet comfort of being home. I knew this conversation with my dad was coming, and though I didn't know what to expect, I'd already decided to go into it with a steady heart. When we finally met at a local cafe, he looked older and worn, like he'd been carrying more than his fair share of regret. We sat across from each other in silence for a few minutes before he finally spoke. "I don't even know where to start," he said, his voice low and rough. "I know I let you down, and I can't pretend I understand all the choices you've made, but I'd like to try." I listened as he explained how hard it had been to raise two sons who were so different, how he'd convinced himself that he was doing what was best for my brother and me, though he now saw how wrong that was. He admitted that he hadn't wanted to see his mistakes, and that realization was painful for him to face. For the first time, he wasn't making excuses, just being honest. When he finally paused, I took a deep breath. Dad, I can't change what happened and neither can you, but I also can't keep carrying that resentment. I've started to find my own way and I'm grateful for that. I just need you to respect where I'm going. He nodded, looking both relieved and sad. I understand, he said. I just hope that someday maybe we can rebuild this. Even if it takes time, we ended the conversation on that note, without any grand gestures or declarations of forgiveness. But as I walked away, I felt lighter, like I'd let go of another piece of the past I didn't need to carry anymore. I knew there was still a long way to go, but it felt like a beginning, a new chapter that this time I would write on my own terms. Back at college, I settled into the rhythm of my sophomore year. My relationship with my grandparents only grew stronger as they continued to cheer me on from a distance, showing up for me in ways my parents hadn't. They'd supported me through the ups and downs and always reminded me that I was worthy, strong, and capable. Their unwavering belief in me became the foundation I leaned on as I grew more confident in myself and my abilities. One night, my grandmother called me, her voice warm and full of pride. "We're so proud of you," she said. "You've come so far, and I want you to know that your strength and resilience mean everything to us. Her words hit deep, and I found myself tearing up, realizing that even though my parents and I might never fully mend, I had a family who loved and believed in me. And maybe that was all I needed. As the seasons changed, I continued to build the life I'd dreamed of, a life defined by my own values and choices. I surrounded myself with friends who felt like family, people who understood the journey I'd been on. And every time I'd visit my grandparents, I could feel how proud they were of me and how their love had helped me become who I was. I never got into Stanford, but I realized I didn't need it to prove my worth. I'd found a place where I belonged, surrounded by people who cared about me. And as I walked through campus feeling the crisp autumn air, I knew I'd made it through the storm. I was finally at peace. Story 2. I'll call my ex-fiancée Olivia and my brother Finn. This is what transpired. I had a really difficult and unpleasant incident around 10 years ago. At the moment, I was prepared to marry my fiancé. Everything was planned out for us. I was prepared to say, I do, the location was reserved, and the guests had already come. But then, unexpectedly, she left me at the altar. Is it possible? She went off on what was meant to be our honeymoon instead of marrying me. However, she chose to go with Finn, another man. Let me now introduce you to Finn. She had been crushing on him since high school. He didn't really notice her that way back then, though. She wrote me a statement outlining all of this, claiming that she took advantage of me because it allowed her to maintain her relationship with Finn. Isn't, quote, it's somewhat harsh. She did admit that she once truly loved me in her message. However, when she and Finn ended up spending the night together and drinking a little too much, her situation altered. She felt after that night that she and Finn were soulmates, genuinely meant to be. I was really beaten down for nearly a year by this whole incident. I was a complete wreck. I kept thinking about that day, so it was incredibly difficult for me to go on. Everyone who attended our wedding gave me astonished and pitying looks, and I thought of her mother sobbing as she gave me the note. Every time I felt like I was improving, those memories simply kept drawing me back. However, time has the ability to heal wounds. I started to recover and move past that day gradually. I ended all contact with Finn and her after deciding I didn't want anything to do with him. It's been 10 years since I last spoke to any of them. My family didn't initially disclose to me that they were still in contact with Finn, but after a few years they did. One day they sat me down and told me that Finn was going to marry her and that she was pregnant. They suggested that because they were going to Finn's wedding and other occasions like the baby shower, I really needed to attempt to get over what had occurred. It was a difficult pill to take. That they handled it that way, not really taking into account how I would feel about it all, made me feel a little deceived. However, I came to the realization that they are adults and that I have no influence over their life choices. I told them that if Finn and her were going to be at any events, I didn't want to be part. Furthermore, I wasn't at all prepared to forgive Finn. After several attempts to persuade us to chat and work things out, They finally realized that I had no desire in making amends with him. After not speaking to Finn and Olivia for a year. Life continued. Now fast forward to last week. Things aren't going well for Finn and Olivia, who I learned are expecting their 6th child. Olivia lost her job when the chain she worked for shuttered, and Finn's firm failed in September. In the end, they had absolutely no savings. My wife and I are doing really well financially, so my relatives suddenly started hinting that we should help them out, especially for the children. However, my spouse was not amenable to it. She firmly disagreed, advising Finn to just get employment. We simply ended the conversation there. After a little while, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. Despite my suspicion that it may be them, I picked it up. As I greeted them, both Olivia and Finn began to turn against me. They called me awful for punishing their children for their parents' previous behavior and said I couldn't get beyond Olivia's acts from years ago. My brother then added a really insightful comment. He inquired as to what it was like to be the cause of their children's hunger. I was a little surprised, but I refused to back down and informed them that they were responsible for their predicament, not me. They were not at all pleased. I ended up hanging up on them when they began to shout and weep. My family hasn't been really pleased with me ever since. They have accused me of venting my rage on Finn's defenseless children and have been calling me a variety of derogatory names. My wife gave me some really simple advice. She said that if they are that worried, they should take money out of their own pockets and that we should advise them to back off. Let's move on to the top remarks. Not the fool, I adore your spouse. And her brilliant flaming spine is tanning me. She is correct. She is also really all the family you require. 10 years ago, Mike and Tammy made their decision. The problem is that Tammy could have stopped it well before the wedding and knew exactly what she was doing. His responsibility is exacerbated by the fact that she had a one-night stand when he was broke. The icing on the cake. Your honeymoon was stolen. It is what I would have sued for. I hope the ring was returned to you. Do it for the money instead. I also adore the wife. She's right too. In particular about their digging into their own wallets. However, it is absurd that Mike and Tammy would phone and yell as if they had some moral superiority. In order to live life with your true family, block them all. S your hero wife, not the fool. They are utter fools. Instead of telling them how awful they are, you would grovel at their feet if you were asking for assistance. Second, it is incredibly careless of them to have a 5th kid that they are unable to provide for. I apologize for the chaos in your household. I would advise you to keep living your life without them. Your parents are free to assist if they so want. There is nothing you owe your brother. They haven't talked for years. Thus, I'm also a little surprised that they would have the audacity to start blaming the OP throughout the chat. Now that they have him, the issue is obviously apparent. Ease of use. You have no more responsibility for those children than anybody else does. The other members of your family may just stop talking about it. Their children go hungry because of you. LOL. Don't misunderstand me. Although I had to seek assistance once or 100 times, I wouldn't say I enjoy watching others go hungry. My children were young, and while there wasn't a worldwide problem, they appeared to be passively waiting for you and your spouse to come to their rescue and not doing any action to improve their situation. He allowed her to embarrass you. They need you now, please. Let's imagine, however, that you only assisted them once. They'll then believe they're on good terms with you and attempt to continue taking advantage of you. I wouldn't. Not at all. No. But even if I don't believe you're the moron, I couldn't stand by and let the children suffer because their parents are stupid. Since there isn't any other option, perhaps purchase them kid-friendly foods to last them a week and let them forage for themselves. They will also gain from it. To tell the truth, I grew up in a small, friendly town where almost everyone knew one another. I attended a university in this same location, and I was fortunate to find employment in the region shortly after I finished. I started working in an area that allows me to give back to the university by supervising students who must perform hands-on work as part of their degree, so it's been really handy. I've been managing the student internships for a few years now, and everything has gone smoothly every time. At least not until a few months ago, there hasn't been a single snag. The university contacted me to inquire about taking on a student for the next semester, as has happened several times in the past. I actually like assisting students, so of course I accepted. In order for us to make all the required arrangements, they said they will email me the student's contact information closer to the beginning of the semester. Finally, last week, I received the email containing the kid's details. However, this is when things took an unexpected turn. My heart kind of fell when I saw the name and the accompanying picture. It was a girl who had contributed much to my misery during my time in middle and high school. She was, in fact, my bully. To be honest, I had thought I would never see her again. Rumour had it that she had joined the same program that I had years before. She just made the decision to change careers after having previously followed a different one. While I was aware of this, given our past, I never imagined that our paths would intersect in this manner. I thought right away that it would not be the greatest idea to supervise her. It appeared likely that bias or unresolved issues would damage her internship because there were too many ancient scars there. Furthermore, I simply didn't want to deal with any drama or reopen past wounds, to be really honest. I chose to be proactive and sent the school an email outlining the circumstances. I said that I knew her personally and that I didn't think it would be a good idea for me to be in charge of her internship. Although individuals do evolve, I was concerned about the dynamic that might arise because I hadn't spoken to her in years. The school responded with compassion. They first responded that they valued my candor and would try to locate her in another situation. Until they responded to me again a few days later, it appeared that this was the end of everything. This time, they clarified that the worldwide situation was making it hard to locate another supervisor since it had reduced the number of alternatives. They added that the student had been told what was going on and that she was fine with me watching over her, but I didn't like it. The idea of having to deal with her every day and perhaps going through some of the bad things that had happened to me in the past was too much to bear. I thus refused to change my mind and informed the university that I didn't feel confident enough to be her supervisor. I hoped they would respect my choice, but they needed to know where I stood. The discussion essentially came to an end at that point, until the student herself made a step that totally threw me off guard. I believed the problem was fixed. My personal phone number was still with her somehow. We choose to utilize it, most likely from our school days. It was already unnerving that she contacted me out of the blue. She begged me to change my mind throughout the call. She clarified that she wouldn't be able to graduate on time if she didn't finish this internship because she hadn't received any other offers. Her graduation would be delayed by a semester if she didn't have this internship, even if it wasn't her last. Although she seemed desperate, I insisted that, considering our past, I shouldn't have been her boss. Her answer changed abruptly. She pointed out that we hadn't spoken in years and accused me of being unjust, as though the past could just be forgotten. Throughout the call, I stood by my choice, and we finally hung up. She then sent out a slew of irate texts. "This is why no one liked you in high school," said one of them, striking a particularly harsh note. Her tone returned to begging after a flurry of similar communications. I decided not to reply to any of her texts, even though she sent me a lot of emotional turmoil. I felt quite torn about the entire scenario. A part of me questioned if I should help her and let the past go, wondering whether I was really being too harsh. However, there was another aspect that seemed legitimate in defending my mental health against possibly upsetting and stressful situations. It's difficult to dismiss the reminders of our previous exchanges, particularly the harsh remarks she used to make about me. It was now evident from her most recent outburst that the dynamics may still be troublesome. I started to wonder if it was the correct thing to maintain my position, or if I was being the fool here by not dismissing it all and watching over her. It's a difficult place to be, particularly when you begin to question your own emotions and choices in light of another person's dire circumstances. Am I the fool? Not the fool, but the top comments now. In contrast to you, this girl obviously possesses the emotional intelligence of a stick of butter. If I had received a genuine apology for what transpired in high school, I may have at least thought about overseeing her, but she doesn't even appear to have thought about that. It's especially perplexing to throw it in your face and then return to begging. It was only confirmed by the amateurish text. Karma, not the fool, is a wit. You handled everything with professionalism and integrity. To help her graduate, you don't have to give up your history password. The university is right. In a supervisory position, you have the right to not get along with her, but she can be okay with you. Send your university the results of the tests. So, just in case they have this on file. She will escalate this paper based on her actions. You don't feel horrible about anything. Not the fool. To be honest, I'm a little surprised that she called you on your personal phone. And the fact that she brought up your school days indicates that she is well aware of the problem. I would also inform her course that she got in touch with you. They ought to talk to her before she does another internship, by the way. She essentially demonstrated that you made the proper choice. She would have blasted you and held you responsible for her shortcomings if you had given her a poor rating, any unfavorable comments, or anything else. Hiroki, you're not incorrect, and save all of her letters. Take a screenshot of the text. Keep all of information in case she ever accuses you of destroying her academic career out of personal animosity. The third story. I'm a 25-year-old lady who enjoys sewing. I've produced some really spectacular garments over the years, including 3 wedding gowns and a couple of graduation ceremony dresses. But it's not my real profession. For me, sewing is more of a serious pastime. I now have a 26-year-old pal named Karina. She will shortly be married. She also requested me to make her wedding gown. I agreed since I thought it was a good concept, but I informed her that I would only pay for the supplies if they weren't too expensive or uncommon. Since creating a dress requires a lot of time and effort, she would need to pay me a small amount for each hour I worked on it. Karina consented even though she wasn't too thrilled about having to pay. 3 months have passed since then. I was still worried that anything would go wrong. Looking back, I got a queasy feeling in my gut. Things got incredibly crazy, so I should have heeded that instinct. Karina proved to be rather difficult to deal with. In all honesty, she has been among the most problematic individuals I've ever encountered, and I used to work in retail, where you see a variety of demanding clients. This is what took place. Karina was always rethinking things. It started with the fabric, then the dress's form, then the small details, and lastly the overall design. Additionally, each time she changed her mind, I had to put in additional work. It was more than simply the adjustments, though. Karina began requesting extremely costly supplies. She insisted that everything must be flawless for her special day, because she had excellent taste. However, in all honesty, it seemed like she was being really choosy and controlling. The final straw then arrived. She made the decision that her outfit should include Swarovski crystals. Adding Swarovski crystals to an address requires a lot of extra labor, and they are quite costly and elegant. Thus, creating this outfit has become a major undertaking. Much larger than I anticipated. It has been difficult and demanding, particularly when your buddy is constantly requesting more and more, and all you want is to make her happy on her wedding day. However, it's difficult when she seems to be unaware of the amount of work required to create a flawless garment. I was thus rather surprised when Karina requested that Swarovski crystals be used to adorn the whole outfit. Considering how costly those gems are, I most certainly wasn't going to cover the entire cost. I simply chuckled when she sent me this since it seemed so ridiculous. I sent her a strong reply back, informing her that I couldn't possibly afford the stones. I made the decision that enough was enough at that point. I believe the message I delivered her was reasonable in light of everything. I said something like, "I appreciate our friendship, Karina, but working with you on this dress has been really difficult. You seem to be taking advantage of me, and your expectations are excessive. I will thus have to halt working on your clothing at this time. A charge for the work I've already completed will be sent to you. You may then pick up the outfit after making the payment. That didn't sit well with Karina. She responded to my text by arguing that since I was the one who backed out of our agreement, she shouldn't be required to pay anything. However, I refused to back down and told her that she would not be allowed to wear the outfit. As it happens, she has been in a frenzy because her wedding is just 1 month away. posting on social media about your search for rental or used clothing choices. This leads me to believe that she sincerely hoped I would give her the garment for free right away. I feel terrible about the way things went now. Everyone I've spoken to believes that I made a foolish decision, but they also believe that Karina's demands were somewhat self-inflicted. I'm conflicted. There's a part of me that wants to simply finish the garment and present it to her. However, I'm unsure of what to do. I want to be nice, but I also don't want to be taken advantage of, so it's a difficult position. When friendships and major endeavors like a wedding dress coexist, it may be challenging. It may get really difficult. Let's move on to the top remarks. She wanted us to wear a dress covered in crystals and pink. Jesus, you are a sweet baby. Because they are so ridiculously costly. I used to use them and beadwork just sometimes. The expense of purchasing enough of them to cover a bridal gown is too high to even consider. In addition to the effort required to stitch them all on, you're not the fool. In a month, she can visit the store and purchase a dress. Therefore, stop putting yourself out there for this individual, not the foolish bride. Zilla has no intention of giving you any money. You'll learn a lesson. The cost of the materials was not limited. Not too expensive, is very individualized. Don't give up on having no money or a dress. I would proceed to complete it and tag it with a reasonable price. She can then pay for it if she so chooses. If not, sell it online at a low price so that another bride, not the fool, may take it and have it fitted and changed for her. Listen, she will pay for the clothing if she really needs it. If she doesn't, it indicates that she was too pleased to put it on your tab even if she knows she can't afford it. Offering to pay for your friend's lunch makes them intentionally order the lobster tail and their priciest bottle of wine. These folks, the fourth story. It seems like yesterday to me. When I was a child, I thought everything would be normal when I got home from school, but it wasn't. My father, who had played a significant role in my life until that point, had moved out. As simple as that. No explanation, no farewell, nothing. I felt abandoned and bewildered after being left alone. Fortunately, my dad's mother, my grandma, took over. She looked after me and filled the void left by my father. Let's go back a few weeks. My grandmother died. It was a depressing period. I also saw my dad for the first time in 14 years during her burial. Seeing him, after all these years, especially under such depressing circumstances, was awkward and uneasy. We all got together to hear my grandma's will after the funeral. As it happens, she left me her house, her property, some land, and a few other items. Although I was grateful that she had me on her mind, my dad was really offended. It seemed unbelievable to him. He immediately began to argue that since she was his mother, he should get the land. First. He said it was unfair that he received nothing while I received everything. My dad has been on a quest ever since. In an attempt to persuade me to give him the land, he has been calling me. He insists that I give it to him right now, and when he dies, he says he will leave it to me and his will. This didn't feel right, therefore I didn't consent to it. My grandmother had explicit instructions in her will, and she would have written it that way if she had intended him to inherit her belongings. However, the property isn't the only factor. In our household, my dad began to propagate rumors. He claimed that I had somehow deceived my grandmother and taken what was rightfully his. I was portrayed by him as someone who was punishing him for abandoning us years prior. Other family members began contacting me as a result. They have been reminding me that since my dad is still my father, I should treat him with respect and care, regardless of what he has done in the past. They discuss filial piety, which holds that kids should always respect their parents. Even if Dad wasn't friendly to me, they say that a good daughter is one who treats her father with kindness. It's quite difficult to deal with these discussions and the ongoing pressure. It feels like everyone is supporting him without really comprehending the circumstances, and they all seem to have an idea about what I need to do. I'm making an effort to uphold my moral convictions, but it's becoming more difficult every day due to the increasing pressure and the possibility that I'm at fault. That quote. All that has been happening. I'm still working through my emotions and determining the best course of action, so it's a lot to cope with. Am I the fool? Let's move on to the top remarks. You're not the fool. For abandoning you, you owe your father nothing. Avoid talking to him at all. If you have to, block his phone number. Leave him alone if he tries to face you directly. Tell all of your family that the decision has been made and put them on blast, that you're keeping the house, and that anyone who tries to bring up the subject again will be blocked. Without oxygen, a fire cannot ignite. Therefore, deprive this problem of all its fuel. A good daughter is one who treats her father well, even if he doesn't treat me well. In these situations, why would you want to be a good daughter? You don't seem to know him very well. Not the fool. Remain resilient. By the way, theft is not like this, if you can't take from yourself, that is. I would like to know whether they may report the abandonment to CPS and file for years of unpaid child support in addition to helping with housekeeping. Even if you had proposed that your grandma take away your father's inheritance since he had left you. Your grandma wanted you to inherit her house so you wouldn't be the fool she left behind. The narrative is over. In the last 14 years, your father must not have spent much time with your grandma. She must have taken over if she reared you and you didn't see him again until the burial, since he had to abdicate his duty to you. When your father passes away, you have little chance of inheriting the house. It will be left to a romantic partner, a beer companion, or someone else if he doesn't sell it and waste the money. Keep your home. The lady who raised you desired for you to own it. The fifth story. My twins are young adolescents, and recently things have been a little chaotic at home. My wife is obtaining a divorce and will soon be an ex-wife. The scoop is as follows. She had been cheating on me with our gardener for a number of years, I discovered. We made a deal when we were married, which is why it's significant, called a prenuptial agreement. However, if one of us cheated, the other would be the primary caregiver for the children and keep our house and most of our money. Here, quote, the twist though. The type of evidence I need to present in court on her and the gardener isn't truly in my possession, but she also lost her job after it was discovered that she was having an affair with her supervisor. Additionally, I have documentation of it that I may present in court. Since then, our kid has been inquiring as to why we are divorcing and whether his mother did something wrong. I quote, "We've been making an effort to keep things straightforward and avoid disparaging their mother. Mum and Dad both love you a lot, is what I normally say. Simply put, our relationship isn't as good as it once was. However, we'll try our best to make things work out for you all. I won't lie in spite of this. I'm rather agitated. Her actions were very awful. I tell myself and the children, however, that she is still their mother. My daughter once informed me that our separation was due to my mother's accusations that I was manipulative and domineering. She believed that I was preventing her mother from pursuing her goals. At that point, I made the decision to inform them more about what was happening, including her infidelity and the fact that she was using a large portion of our funds for upscale clothing like Gucci when we actually needed them for bills and school fees. I clarified that my intention was not to exert control over her. I even acknowledged my shortcomings as a husband. However, the children were being misinformed, therefore the truth had to be known. My ex is now enraged. She claims that I made the children despise her and turn them against her. In fact, my kid questioned her about her infidelity. She accused me of destroying the children's perception of her. I explained to her that it was her own fault. That's what has been happening then. Trying to be honest with the children while yet shielding them is very difficult. Am I the fool? Not the fool, but the top comments now. Your children are old enough to comprehend the reality and its consequences. They are entitled to the truth. You must keep the truth to yourself, even if it's unfair that she gets to spread false information about you. But as a divorced child, at least keep them out of the rest of it. They don't have to listen to or be aware of all the nonsense that will occur between you and your wife's attorneys. That quote right. She said that I damaged their perception of her. When he stated the truth, she complained about how it damaged her reputation, but she had no problem lying to the children if she didn't want anybody to know about it. Perhaps they were the wrong things for her to do. Incredible concept. I am aware. Yes, OP, making things more obvious won't damage someone's reputation. Unfortunately, she does bad things that damage her reputation. At some time, your children would have had to learn the truth. They are old enough to comprehend what is happening. Therefore, don't be hard on yourself. You are not seeking retribution. Rather, you spoke the truth because you don't want to lose your children. Story 3. My brother, 30, has always been the eldest kid in our family, and I am a 28-year-old lady. He seemed to be impervious to our parents' criticism. I had arrived by chance. They weren't excited to have a girl growing up, and they hadn't prepared for me. They never truly wanted a daughter, I knew, and my fussy baby self just made things worse. Annoying. I love my mum so much. As if he could walk on water, my brother received all the love and attention in the meanwhile. I was also disliked by my brother. He always had the ability to win over adults as a child, and he took advantage of this by lying about me whenever he could. He would accuse me if he broke the law or stole something. And our parents had complete faith in him. They had no interest in hearing my version of events. They seemed to view him as the bright spot and me as the problem. Additionally, he made a concerted effort to ruin my relationships by tormenting me until I felt completely alone and depressed. Even worse, he turned my friends against me by manipulating them. Suddenly, the friends I believed I could trust wanted no part of me. When he made false accusations against me, I felt like I was up against an insurmountable hill, and my parents were always on his side no matter what. I believed that leaving home as soon as possible was the only way to solve the problem. I thus put in a lot of effort and was awarded a scholarship to go a different place for college. My brother, meanwhile, remained in our hometown. My parents paid for everything, and he rented a house close to them. They stopped contacting me altogether, and the only comments on the family group chat were compliments on my brother's accomplishments. They never once inquired about my well-being or offered me assistance. He had everything delivered to him on a silver platter, but I had to do it myself. They never gave me cash, words of support, or even a friendly greeting. I finally got married and relocated to a different state after finishing. My relatives didn't bother to attend the wedding, even though I invited them. The fact that they were unable to accommodate such a significant occasion in my life hurt. I'm now expecting my second child, and my husband's family has been a huge source of support. They have given me a warm welcome and filled the gap left by my own family. My parents have strong traditional beliefs, holding that the family name must be passed down through the generations and that the man should always be the head of the home, descendants. They were really taken aback when my brother walked out. They were shocked to learn that their ideal son would not bear them the heirs they had hoped for. Maintaining the family line is their obsession, and they were shaken by this news. My husband's family is still wonderful in spite of everything. I've learned from them that not every family is the same as mine. Even if it's not from the folks I expected, I've finally found a place where I can feel loved and supported after a healing journey. My husband's last name is not my family's name, thus my children and I will inherit it. My parents won't consider adoption as a way to maintain the family line abruptly. They only accept relatives who were born into a legitimate marriage. Here's why my parents are threatening to cut off my brother's financial support after he just got in touch with me. He depends on their money to survive because he has never held a real job. They threatened to cease providing him with money if he didn't mend his connection with me. Why? Because they wish to get back in touch with me in order to spend more time with my kids, despite the fact that I haven't had a decent relationship with them for years. One of the main reasons I cut ties with my family was because of my brother. He turned our parents against me, lied about me, and bullied me as a child. However, he is not solely to blame. I've severed my relationships with my family in large part because of him. In order to avoid being disowned by our parents, he is now attempting to make amends. However, I have no intention of allowing them to re-enter my life in order to claim my children as their grandchildren. My distance from my family isn't just due to my brother. My parents are also to blame. Even when he was lying and making things hard for me, they always gave him the benefit of the doubt. My brother just traveled out to see me and sobbed a lot while claiming that he was stressed out from keeping his sexuality a secret, which is why he bullied me so much. He said he snapped at me because he was in the closet. After listening, I instructed him to shut up. I don't care about him or his justifications, and I consider my family to be dead. He is now accusing me of being petty and trying to ruin an adult's life because of something that occurred when I was a youngster. However, I refuse to allow my family to re-enter my life in order to provide my parents with a backup supply of blood-related grandkids through me and my children. My brother is their golden kid, and they have always loved him. However, they now want to rely on me and my kids since he hasn't lived up to their expectations. Because their favourite son has let them down, I won't be their fallback option. Is it my fault that I didn't forgive my brother and had his parents disown him? Edit. In addition, my parents want the surname to be passed down to my unborn child. Let quote S move on to the top remarks. Nobody is being forced to do anything by you. Your brother's sexual orientation has no bearing on your version of events, and you're abandoning them to face the repercussions of their actions and decisions. Not the fool. Your parents are having a lot of issues. You don't have that problem. He needs a therapist, so you may at least suggest that he see one queer, right here. Opie, you are not the fool. In a lot of respects, your brother is a fool, but I want to draw attention to his allegation of fear. He treated you horribly and didn't feel the need to be in your life unless he wanted something, so you told him to buzz off. Being you and your family and interacting with your extremely toxic parents is something. To be honest, I don't give a damn if it was. I don't understand why he was acting that way. It was just the burden of being closeted. Nothing is justified by that. If he calls you derogatory names and you refuse to accept his lack of apologies, laugh in his face and close the door. You owe neither him nor your parents anything at all. Make every effort to keep them at bay and relish the lovely family you created without them. I concur. Before he came out, OP shut him out of her life with her parents. Eliminate all of them losers. They are unnecessary in that harmful environment. He now has to lie on his bed, which she made, making him too reliant on his parents. Being disowned shouldn't be a big deal because the man is 30 years old and ought to be able to support himself by now. Lowell, he didn't even attend your wedding. Their connection with you remained unchanged, and despite the fact that they are now approaching you, it is clear that their self-interest still comes first. Give up using the family name. Such individuals are not deserving of a legacy. The second story. I just started inviting friends and relatives to visit because I have a newborn at home. I told my best friend that she should think about wearing a bra or a heavier shirt before she came over, since I knew she was going to hold my kid. Why? Due to the fact that my child enjoys grabbing things and has already informed me of the extreme sensitivity of her nipple piercings. The infant has quite a grasp, so I simply wanted to let her know. Despite my communication, she arrived up wearing a somewhat thin top that showed off her piercings. I handed my kid a sweater so she could cover herself a bit, but she was already looking at her chest with fingers out to grab. She gave me a strange look and accused me of making fun of her breasts by even implying that she should cover them with something. She refused to listen when I attempted to clarify that wasn't what I meant. She took the kid away from me when I asked if she wanted to hold him. My kid had grabbed onto her piercing within 5 minutes, and she yelled in agony as she attempted to get him away. I reminded her quietly. That's why I initially advised wearing a bra. She became even more irate as a result. No, you said that because you're a misogynist, she informed me. She stormed out, leaving me completely bewildered. She's been claiming to our friends that I made fun of her breasts and asked her to cover them or wear a bra because I didn't want her around, but that is completely untrue. Is there something I'm missing? Her response, in my opinion, is inappropriate. Am I the fool? Edit. She advised me to educate my son not to grip nipples during our argument. He is still a baby. Story 3. My wife is 5 months along in her pregnancy. Since she lost the first kid, this one is officially our second. The issue is that my wife is often upset, nervous or moody. Not the typical hormonal moodiness that comes with pregnancy, but a somewhat exaggerated form of it. Whether it is a subset of our prior pregnancy loss is unknown to me. Despite seeing a therapist, she keeps going in her own direction. She says it can be hormonal outbursts or prior trauma from bereavement when I speak with her again. But she always finds something wrong with it. When my 10-hour work shift is over, aside from the fatigue, she would start pointless arguments about things like my purchasing the incorrect shaped carrots or switching to my TV station to unwind. even though she wasn't actually watching it. It makes sense a couple times a month, but this happening daily is wearing me down. She keeps saying absent-minded things like leave her job or take out loans to be with me for the time being. Even though I would like that, who would cover the expenses and loan repayment? As the days pass, I'm growing increasingly irritated and losing sleep. She also suffers from sleeplessness and keeps me up needlessly by incessantly asking me about our baby's health. This causes me to overthink and gets me afraid to stay up the entire night. Despite my assurances that everything will be fine, she nevertheless becomes even more irate. Additionally, she leaves between 60 and 90 missed calls every day while I'm at work, particularly during meetings. After considering all of this, I've come to the conclusion that she needs ongoing company in order to get us through this pregnancy. I thus phoned her parents and politely asked them to take care of my wife for the time being. Both of them are retired, and they gladly accepted my wife. But how about we sell my wife? Although I intended to contact her daily and visit on the weekends, she interpreted it as me, releasing me from accountability. Even though I think I'm helping her fight loneliness and seek advice from a parent, she's calling me a fool for letting her live with her parents. Am I the fool for letting her parents take care of her in order to accomplish two goals at once, have peace of mind, and make sure her needs are met? Let's move on to the top remarks. The 60 to 90 calls per day and the other behaviours you describe go much beyond typical anxiety and require help. Therefore, I'm going to say no to the moron. She needs help, and I don't think her parents are qualified to provide it since something is very wrong. I'm not saying it's not possible to stay with them. To allow you the room and peace of mind you require to be the single provider. But this cannot be the only answer. I acknowledge that her parents lack the qualifications to provide her with all the assistance she requires. But occasionally having encouraging individuals close by may be beneficial when experiencing such an event. When she stays with her husband, she spends more than 10 hours a day alone, which is just not the greatest setting for her given her anxiety, trauma, and demands as a soon-to-be mother. Though it's unlikely that she is pregnant, depression is greatly influenced by hormones. She needs medical attention. Given that she doesn't want to go OP, it's unlikely that a parent will want to take any constructive action. I would discuss the severity of her conduct with an OB/GYN and a therapist. 60 to 90 calls a day, pleading with you to quit your work so that you may remain with her, starting arguments all the time, and maintaining your weight. Hormones don't do that. That is a catastrophe in mental health. Shame on her gyno and therapist for not taking the initiative to suggest that this may be prepared, either a trauma reaction, psychosis, sadness, or pregnancy. Here are a few choices. The first step, in my opinion, should be to have her parents visit and to have her counselor take over or become more engaged. This has the potential to rapidly escalate into a dangerous crisis. Perhaps having her parents stay with you all and tag team with her would be an additional choice. More eyes could be preferable than the existing circumstance or sending her back to her parents, in my opinion. Story 4. I'm a 25-year-old woman who has been dating a 30-year-old man for more than a year. His best pal is always at his side. This man has no pals and is from another nation. However, he does have a wife and a child. For the past month, you've been spending every weekend with this guy. I decline his invitation since I'm so sick of him. In addition, the man is a fool. He speaks about my breasts and cracks jokes all the time. Because of his extreme misogyny, I dislike being around him. I still occasionally do it for my lover. He has repeatedly told him. I detest those jokes. I've also done it. The issue is that we chose to visit my boyfriend's parents' home in the Highlands during our few days off. We made the decision to travel, and some of his relatives will be joining them as they are visiting his sister in another state. Although I've met a few of them before, folks from all around the world are also attending. However, his friend, his wife, and their child live approximately an hour away from here. When he expressed his desire to visit, his wife became irate and declined. He thus intended to come here and leave them alone at the beach. I informed my boyfriend that I didn't want that either, and that I simply wanted to be with him and not his dumb pal for once. He did, however, still say he will be there. After becoming enraged, his wife made the decision to return to the city. Since my boyfriend's family hasn't arrived yet, I promised his wife that I would accompany her when she arrived to pick him up. My boyfriend was furious because I departed with her and was unable to stay to visit his family because I arrived in his car. He might invite his buddy to our honeymoon, the delivery room, etc. if we get married, so I told him I was sick of him and his friend and that I would reevaluate our relationship. His family was thrilled to see me, and he has been flooding my phone with texts accusing me of being selfish and immature. Even though I'm ignoring him, I'm wondering whether I was mistaken. Am I the fool who left? Shall I return? The fifth story. We're in a horrible place because of certain financial losses. In order to help us get back on our feet, my husband asked my mother-in-law if we could remain with her. I know that was really kind of her, but it was a difficult move for me. The residence of my mother-in-law is enormous. Consists of 3 baths, 4 or 5 bedrooms, a home gym and an art studio. I thus believed that we could figure things out. My children had been anticipating it. Mother-in-law up. I'm making every effort to silence them. However, that might seem unachievable at times when you have a newborn and a toddler. Until 9:30, a mother-in-law prefers to sleep. Typically nearer 10. When we woke her up, I initially thought it was terrible. However, she has been sobbing recently about her lack of sleep. Even if they receive more than 8 hours each night, her phony crying is really awful. It doesn't make you cry. Since the mother-in-law doesn't weep very often, her husband has been somewhat worried about the tears. He now routinely consoles her every morning while looking at me with a dagger. His treatment of me has changed as a result, and he is starting to act extremely rudely. Additionally, he has been using a variety of bribes to persuade his mother-in-law to stop sobbing. I took a seat and attempted to discuss it with my mother-in-law. As politely as I could, I mentioned that she and her spouse lead a lifestyle that isn't typical of 99% of people. She has never held a job. He only works a few days a month, if at all. Additionally, I am aware that she has always been free to do as she pleases. I'm doing my best though, and I have 2 little infants. According to her mother-in-law, she got started right now, but she's merely upset when she wakes up. She said that was okay and acknowledged that I was worse off than she was. The following morning, the mother-in-law walked downstairs, obviously upset, but she didn't begin to cry until her husband had gotten up. He instantly gave me the death gaze before embracing and consoling her. At last, I realized this was absurd. Her inability to sleep till 10 is the reason she is weeping. As like that's a typical need and he should stop giving in to her since he's the reason she keeps pretending to cry. I know she has dry eyes, which is why she doesn't produce tears, remarked the irate mother-in-law. Come on, even though she occasionally needs eye drops. How can I shout at her in her own home, she said. Perhaps my husband's refusal to come for me is another reason why I'm upset. However, it is my issue, the final tale. In 2021, my parents will not be there at my wedding. Recently graduated from college. Due to costly rent, I relocated to a different state for work. My parents' family friends, the Scotts, gave me their guest home for just $300 per month. I had no idea that this wonderful deal would turn into a year of trouble. My parents' business colleagues and close friends, the Scotts, had 3 children. The Scotts got too engaged in my personal life, especially my relationship, as soon as I moved in. Things took a bad turn when they made up stories to tell my parents, accusing me of being promiscuous, not being home much, and even plotting to live with my boyfriend in secret. You could feel their contempt for my lover. Displaying contempt, subtle aggressiveness, and even disparaging remarks regarding his adoption. The meddling intensified during family gatherings, where they criticized my boyfriend, whom they had only met 3 times, and called me a bad influence on their teenage daughter. I should also mention that both my boyfriend and I have jobs and abstain from alcohol and tobacco. Despite their mistreatment, my boyfriend is a nice man who has always shown them respect. The Scott family's father blurred the lines between inappropriate landlord-tenant connections by going so far as to discuss his marital issues and lack of a sexual life. When the guest house's refrigerator failed and they required that I pay for a $1,900 replacement, that was the tipping point. They had a big impact on my parents since they didn't always support me and sided with the Scots, continually disparaging my partner without cause. I made the decision to move out with a few of my girlfriends by the end of 2022, but I didn't say goodbye. To prevent more conflict. The summer of 2023 comes around. My boyfriend proposed to me when we were living together in a different state. I was shocked to see how joyful and supportive my parents were when he asked for their permission. Even my parents were flown out to see us get engaged. In the fall of 2023, we began the process of organising our wedding. The parents of my fiancé graciously volunteered to pay for the wedding. Ironically, my mother refused to participate in the planning, saying she detested it. She insisted that we manage everything alone, even though my future mother-in-law and I invited her several times. A change from the bride's mother's usual participation. Although it was enjoyable, my mother maintained that this was the only thing she wanted to do on the trip. So my mother's mother flew her to New York to shop for wedding dresses. My dad texted me in the winter of 2023 to insist that I invite the Scots. Citing the grief it would give me on our particular day, I politely rejected. A nuclear war broke out in the family as a result of this rejection. My parents insisted that the Scots be included and that they would not go to the wedding. In an effort to save face, my mother refused to ask me to Christmas after my father accused me of ruining his happy life to begin mine. I attempted to explain my choice and apologized, but my parents weren't open to it, hurling unfounded charges and insults. It has been cancelled to claim my side of the family. After that, my mother changed the subject and threatened to post on social media about my disdain for the family if I didn't attend Christmas. I've texted them to wish them a happy Christmas and birthday, but I haven't discussed the matter with them. As my wedding day draws near, I still feel the hurt of their absence and the hurtful remarks. I don't understand. I quote am at fault. I'm hurting. The consequences. All as a result of my refusal to invite the Scots. The original post has been edited further. Thank you. Thank you for informing me about it. French kissy toast. Edit. The celebrations for our destination wedding will start 3 days before the wedding. I would thus have to put up with the Scots for up to 4 days if I gave in and invited them. I don't want to go around the resort, turn around and have to look at them, and then feel depressed right away. In addition, I worry that my parents may make trouble if they choose to go without the Scots. To provide background for my initial post at 24F, I am now in a really sad circumstance. My wedding will not be attended by my parents. I won't invite their pals because of this. My mother sent me many SMS when I got up this morning. She insisted that I break off our engagement, call off the wedding, relocate back to their house and quit my work. She began to say things like, "I understand that you're not happy. It's all right. You made an effort. It's time to return home now. You need to mature a little bit. This really annoys me. My marriage was officially approved by my parents 6 months ago. They are upset that they didn't get their way and now want me to adjust every aspect of my life. This is my life, I replied in response, and it's their fault if they don't want to accept my choices. However, I am really stunned. My family does not depend on me for financial support. I do a fantastic job. Devoted companion. How did end parents think of this shit? The long tale has been revised. My parents refused to come to my wedding 3 months ago. At first, I was at ease and accepted. I'm excited to celebrate with everyone in attendance and know that my parents won't be there to spoil it. That calm was broken, though, by a text from my 19-year-old younger brother, who revealed that if he went to my wedding, our parents would throw him out of the house and leave him without money. I was completely heartbroken by this. My brothers and I have a tight relationship, and I adore them. My eldest brother lives alone, and I have 3 brothers ages 19, 22, and 27. Our parents still reside with my 2 younger siblings, even if my parents choose not to attend the wedding. I express my strong desire for my brothers to go, letting them know I'm behind them. Following their mutual assistance, I made travel arrangements for them, optimistic about their involvement. I was gullible enough to think our parents would agree to this choice. In their ensuing tirade, they accused my brothers of abandoning the family by supporting me and used financial threats to persuade them to skip the event. If my brothers still wanted to go, I promised to help them out financially, being aware that they would be expelled. But I understood how hard it was to give up familiarity, considering this outburst. My brothers gave me a call and suggested an intervention that would address the larger picture of my parents' abuse, or more general family problems. I did everything I could to explain why this was a horrible idea. I was hesitant, but I begged. I helped them over the phone. Sibling loyalty seemed to bind me. In the middle of disgusting charges, yesterday's call validated my concerns. I was subjected to personal assaults that ranged from disparaging remarks about my fiancé to unfounded criticism of our lifestyle decisions. My father's verbally abusive outburst ended with a callous rejection of my emotions. I took the following notes throughout the 2-hour intervention. Because he enjoys snowboarding and lacks the ability to engage in thoughtful discussion, my fiancé is not an intellectual. 2. Since my fiancé lacks royal or aristocratic ancestry, he is unable to have bright kids. 3. When my fiancé went from another state for the day to seek for my hand in marriage, it was impolite of him to arrive without wine or flowers. 4. My desire to relocate to a different place with my fiancé and change jobs is a manipulative strategy. 5. When you're angry, it's acceptable to call people names and slurs, according to my dad. 6. My father told me that I was abandoning him and that my choice to change my job path was foolish. 7. Believes my fiancé is a loser because of his work as a salesperson. 8. My folks are furious. I haven't seen my uncle in 13 years and I never offered to invite him. Who is a resident of Russia. I had a literal WTF moment. 9. My father is unhappy with my relationship and feels it's wrong. Says it would be wise to end the relationship. 10. My dad claims that it will haunt him for the rest of his life because he regrets not hitting my fiancé in the face when he asked for his blessings. He claims that he didn't hit him and that he merely bestowed his blessings in order to save my feelings. 11. Claims that the parents of my fiancé are cruel for not answering their texts. 12. I referred to my fiancé's mother as a bitch. 13. Said that everyone at my engagement party was startled by the size of the gathering and that they were all rednecks and unintelligent. I quote, V made the decision to stay. 14. My dad spent the remaining minute of the conversation yelling at the top of his lungs that I am a bitch, a fool, and a foolish person. I began sobbing hysterically. I felt like a small kid again at this moment. 15. When I told him about all the terrible things his buddies had done to me and why I didn't want to invite them to the wedding, he accused me of lying. When I told him that his 70-year-old buddy would want to discuss his sex life with me, he even accused me of lying. 16. I sobbed as I told my father, I wish you also cared about my feelings, because I'm also really hurt, and I just want you to understand my perspective. Oh, he said, why should I give a damn about how you feel? You have no regard for my principles, my friends, or me. You foolish bitch, screw your feelings. I immediately hung up the phone. My brothers confirmed that they would still be at my wedding after the call, because this has turned into a matter of confronting my father's inappropriate actions. My brother tried to defend us, but our father's narcissism was stronger than us. The call was painful, but it was essential for my siblings to see him for who he really was. I felt so dehumanized, gaslighted, and devalued. I never imagined that I would block my parents in the future. The first day of going without contact is today. In case my 19-year-old brother shows up to my wedding, my parents have threatened to throw him out of the house. Since my father's narcissism was too much for us, my brothers, who are 19, 22, and 27, decided to throw an intervention that completely blew up in our faces. I quote, V blocked my parents now, and I don't know what will happen to my brothers who were supposed to be at my wedding. In conclusion, my parents will not be present at my wedding. I married. On Friday, I got married. Although it was a happy day, my parents and 2 of my brothers were not present. Last month, I decided to stop communicating with my parents, and that decision has now been confirmed. My eldest brother supported me and escorted me down the aisle, even though my 2 younger brothers were not present, as you will soon see. We were closer than ever before this unanticipated development. There is a bright side to all the heartache and drama. The day of my wedding was magical. No tension or drama at all. I had never felt so much love for my spouse, and it was genuinely the happiest day of my life. My spouse literally takes away all of my worries. Of course, there were brief times when I felt vulnerable, crying in private in front of my spouse as my feelings got the better of me. Nevertheless, the week was flawless even with the pain of my brother's absence and my occasional moments of remorse over my parents. I am quite fortunate. During breakfast with my spouse and elder brother the day after the ceremony, I found out that my parents had been attempting to contact my brother non-stop. To avoid upsetting me over the week, my husband and brother kept this information from me, but I was so curious that I persisted on asking my brother to check what my parents had said to him. I was very shaken by what I read. "She will never forgive you for this," my brother texted, "and our whole family will never be the same. What did she say? Please pardon us. The family was deceived by her. She has lost her mind. Her morals have been totally altered by this evil family who have been preparing her for 3 years. By getting married, she's committing a grave error. I'm glad you two are back together. Asterisk. My in-laws are part of a sinister family. My mother's harsh remarks validated what I had been struggling with. Their conviction that their world is skewed. In a moment, the shame I had been carrying vanished. I came to the realization that my immense joy with my spouse would never be sufficient for them. I would no longer allow their suffering to hold me captive. Someone who wants to spend the rest of their life in miserable misery cannot be changed. This is when it starts to become ridiculous. To keep Scott's wife from seeing my wedding pictures, I banned her on Instagram. In response, Mr. Scott, who hadn't seen or spoken to his wife and kids in more than a year, sent me a massive text accusing me of being violent to them. He went on to say that he would no longer help me and would not be there for me in the event of a divorce. I quickly blocked him since I wouldn't put up with such a dumb message. P.S. I assumed he had already been blocked. I am grateful for the bravery and support this Reddit community has given me, and I am eager to begin this new chapter in my life. Cheers to a future unencumbered by the poisonous hold of my past.